but Wallace snapped open the slim leather briefcase he'd carried in with him. "Are you telling me you can't keep the inmates in your prison safe, Chief Deputy Warden?" "Prisons are built to keep those on the outside safe, and that's where I suggest Mr. Bennett stay," she replied. "If he's dropped into our population and asks too many of the wrong questions, he won't live through the first week. And even if he does—"
"Your objection has been noted, Peyton."
Finally deigning to speak, Warden Fisher cut her off and indicated that she should return to her seat. He'd been at the helm of California's most notorious supermax for only 3 years, but at 61, he'd been in corrections twice as long as she had. He'd worked at Corcoran and San Quentin before Pelican Bay, was a personal friend of Arnold Schwarzenegger, the governor who'd first appointed him, and ruled his prison with an iron fist. A product of the get-tough-on-crime sentiment that had swept across the nation in the 70s and 80s, the precursor to prisons like Pelican Bay, Fisher wasn't well liked by either staff or inmates. Stocky, with a barrel chest, bowed legs, and a scratchy voice, he reminded her of a grizzled hermit. But Peyton did her best to ignore his rough edges. As far as she was concerned, he confused rehabilitation with punishment. She was merely biding her time until he retired. As second-in-command, she hoped to take his place, at which point she planned to guide the prison in a much more enlightened direction.
"Rosenberg, what do you think?"
The warden turned to the much younger man on his left. Senior investigator of the prison's 4-member police force, Officer Frank Rosenberg was in his late 30s and wore a police uniform instead of a suit. Charged with monitoring all drug and gang activity, as well as investigating any other crime perpetrated in or originating from Pelican Bay, including homicide, money laundering, bank robberies, home invasions, even prostitution, Rosenberg and his men had their hands full. With 3,343 inmates incarcerated in the supermax, most of whom were level 4, the worst of the worst, to use a catchphrase Peyton had heard ad nauseum since accepting her position there 6 months ago, the ratio of investigators to inmates definitely wasn't optimal. The Security Housing Unit, or SHU, was supposed to level the playing field. Approximately 1,200 of Pelican Bay's inmates resided in complete isolation with no break from their 8-by-12-foot concrete cells except for 1 hour a day, when they were allowed to pace, alone, in a cement box the size of a racquetball court. Despite being constantly monitored and having no privileges, they managed to run extensive criminal organizations that affected people inside and outside the prison. Fingering his dark brown goatee, Frank scowled.
"You know how it is, boss. We're working our asses off, but it takes hours and hours each day just to go through inmate communications. The bad guys are winning. I believe the Hell's Fury are responsible for the death of Judge Garcia. Dietrich Whitehead or someone else put out the hit. Garcia was about to preside at Chester Wellington's trial, and the Hell's Fury didn't want that. But I can't explain exactly how they pulled it off, and proving it? That'll be even tougher." "So you like this idea?" Warden Fisher prompted.
Barely 5 feet 8 inches, an inch taller than Peyton, Frank glanced at Simeon. It was clear he didn't like the idea, but in deference to the corrections department, he was trying not to reject it out of hand.
"I'd rather hire a few more officers who'd work under my command so we could handle this in-house." "There's no money to hire additional staff, you know that."
The warden drummed his yellowed fingernails on the table.
"We could ally ourselves with the Santa Rosa police, set up another task force like they did for Operation Black Widow," Frank said.
The warden had begun to chuckle before Frank could even get the words out.
"That's your answer?" Operation Black Widow encompassed 30 government agencies, including the FBI. It took nearly 3 years and was one of the largest, most expensive investigations of a U.S. gang to date. If this state doesn't have the funds to hire a few more cops, it sure doesn't have the funds for another Operation Black Widow. You can bet the feds won't bankroll it. They have too many of their own problems right now.
Not pleased with this response, Frank sat taller.
"What we can't afford is a misstep. If we screw up, the Hell's Fury will gain even more power. I don't have to tell you they're growing at an unprecedented rate on both sides of the fence."
Wallace jumped in again.